Chapter 7, Forgiveness Sake Q&A. Bev, we're chatting about forgiveness in this chapter, and as you rightly say up front, it's easily misunderstood by most of us. So help us out. What have you come to understand as true forgiveness?
True forgiveness is never having to revisit the issue that happened or the interaction or the trauma with emotion. So it's when I can talk about what happened, but I don't feel emotional about it, and I don't feel the need to become aggressive or repressive or anything like that. I can talk about what happened, and it's only from an experiential point of view. I don't have to harp on it.
So how do we get to that point?
Part of it, I think, is understanding what your inherent value is and who you're about, and that things that happen to you by other people are not personal. They are experiences. And I think we may have touched on this somewhere, or we may, because it is a theme that I deeply believe is important. When you have a car accident, and for example, and somebody jumps a stop street and they hit you, it's not personal. They weren't aiming at your car. So for you to take that on personally as something that has happened to you that you can never get past or never move past, and it was always that big drama that happened to you and it has shifted your life and etc., is missing the point of what it was. It was an experience. It's something that happened. It does not detract from who you are, what you're good at, what you're capable of, what your worthiness is, what your lovability is, and what you have the right to claim in the world. And in the same way, we need to work on ourselves to a point where we know how deeply inherent our own value is, that when somebody hurts us or does something that does not fulfill a need we have, or thwarts our intentions, or unfulfills an expectation we have, that we can put it into the context of, this is not about me. It's not a reflection of me being unworthy of having that need met, or me being not good enough at X, Y, Z so that this isn't happening. If somebody hurts me because they can't meet my needs, for example, this is a reflection of them being unable to meet the needs of another person. It is not the reflection of me being unworthy of having my needs met. And that's what I mean when I say it's not personal.
It's quite tricky, though, especially in relationships, isn't it? Because those are personal, and when you really get to know somebody and they hurt you, or it's perceived that they hurt you, I think that's quite a difficult one to come back from and to really forgive. So how did you deal with that in your divorce?
I suppose what I had to realize was that there's two measures of divorce. The one is the clinical and often very difficult and acrimonious, unfortunately, medical almost divorce of the legal system, creating a separation of two states, or into two states, where you have to hold by that, and there's a document that holds you by that and precedent that holds you by that. And the other thing is the divorce that happens emotionally, because a lot of people separate their marriages and they create this thing called a divorce, but they don't actually divorce for the rest of their lives, and they interact on a very negative, often, and complicated basis, or a positive and an agreeable basis, but they are interacting for the rest of their lives, and often the divorce from the two people comes much later. I had only truly divorced my ex-husband years later, when I was able to think of him with compassion and understand where he was coming from a place of grace and understanding and not judgment. But the work I had to do that was to recognize that in our marriage, even though I came out of the marriage feeling like it was a very difficult place for me, that I could own the fact it must have been equally difficult for him. And that there was so much that he must have had an experience of in that marriage that was not positive of me. And that I could own the fact that he did not have a positive experience of me. I did not have a positive experience of him. But it's not reflective on his inability to be of value to somebody in the world, or mine. And therefore, I needed to take out of it the growth that was being mirrored for me. What was being mirrored for me? A dishonoring. And I had to start asking myself the question, how am I not honoring me? And what work do I need to do? And when I started to focus on that, it didn't become about him anymore and what my perceived limitations of him were, or what he's not contributing or contributing. It doesn't matter, because there was a forgiveness of his being not enough for me, and letting that go and accepting that.
And what happens if we live with unforgiveness in our lives?
It's a very heavy thing to carry, unforgiveness, because it's resentment, really, is what it is. Unforgiveness means I cannot let go of what you did to me. It is so heavy and so painful for me, and I feel like I need to hold it over your head. And if I can hold this over your head and keep you beholden to this outstretched arm between us, you have to keep trying to make nice with me. And if you don't make nice with me, it's not my problem. I'm not obligated to make nice with you, because you hurt me. So you're on the opposite end of that stick. And it's heavy to carry a stick. And it's something you have to keep outstretched all the time. And if you think about that, just in a context of holding a pen out in front of you, how long could you do that before your arm gets tired and so does your body? So metaphysically and spiritually and emotionally, we exhaust ourselves holding on to the feeling that comes with an unmet need or thwarted intention or an unfulfilled expectation. We hold on to that. It's exhausting.
And isn't it true that then holding on to that unforgiveness also has or could have serious health implications?
It does, because energetically, if we do not release the energy we feel inside of it, it has to go somewhere. So if the feeling is inside of us and there's hurt, if we don't cry it out till we're empty and there's peace after that crying, that energy remains inside of us and it starts batting in and around our cells, our DNA, our programs, the health, vitality of our being, and it will corrupt it. We've seen that time and time again. There is emotion stored in tumors. There's emotion stored in illness, and people keep remanifesting for it. And I just want to ask the same question again and again. How's that working for you? Well, I'm not going to forgive him. Fantastic. How's that working for you? Is your day filled with more joy? Can you go through your day with grace? Are your relationships fuller because of it? Are you able to access vulnerability? Are you keeping yourself from relationships because of it? Or can you still have really united, vulnerable, beautifully intimate, connected relationships holding on to that unforgiveness? Or is it that you just don't understand what forgiveness is?
Why have you brought forgiveness into a book about parenting? How can it help parents to understand it better?
I think that if people do not deliberately master forgiveness, they keep a barrier between themselves and anybody else they interact with on an ongoing basis. Children who grow up with parents who are bitter and unforgiving become bitter and unforgiving, unless for some reason they look at this and they go, this doesn't work for me. I have to go and change that and shift this consciousness, and off they go to grow themselves. If they don't, they naturally follow in the energy of their parents and they become unforgiving. Great. So they're already setting up precedents where they're judging, because unforgiveness is a judgment. What you did is wrong and I'm going to hold it over your head. I cannot let go of this and put this down because I'm going to give you power to hit me again. I will not do that. So I'm going to hold it over your head. It's a judgment. And as soon as you're judging, we know in court, the judge does not sit on the same level as everybody else. He's elevated or she's elevated. Why? Because she's in a position of power. And if the judge is in a position of power, they can't be hurt by the people who are in the courtroom, can they? It's the same way in relationships. So, of course, in parenthood, in any kind of relationships, being able to master forgiveness is the greatest sense of human interaction that you can keep flowing between two people. Because if I can hurt you on a daily basis by doing little things I'm not even aware of, not meeting your expectations, thwarting your intentions, etc., and we can clear that again and again and again, keep that channel of communication clear between us. Of course, that's essential in parenting. And therefore, a child can turn around and say, I was really uncomfortable with what you did earlier. It made me feel this, and I'd prefer that this happened. Can you try to do it that way? Oh, but for the relationships we can build that way, compared to the child going, I can't believe my mother did that to me. That is so painful, and holding it because they have no context into which to empty that. And something lines the channel of communication between the mother and the child. And it'll stay there, and then something will build on it, and something will build on it. And slowly, the channel of communication between two people, parent and parent, parent and child, doesn't make a difference, gets corrupted and closed down, and there's not enough of a flow of energy. And when that happens, there goes the relationship.
So, Bev, do you have any practical steps that people can take if they're wanting to begin this process of forgiveness?
Absolutely. The first thing is the cognitive acceptance, that just in your mind, accept the fact that when I forgive somebody else, I am not handing over power. That is a very big thing for people. No, if I forgive him, he'll do it again. That is not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is saying, I do not condone what you've done, and I do not accept it, and I do not give you permission to do it again. But I'm letting go of the emotion I'm carrying because I've held on to it, because it's making me tired and it's holding me back from having fulfilling, wonderful interactions with you or anybody else. And so on that basis and that understanding between us, I'm putting the energy of that disappointment down. And now we can move forward with the knowledge that you don't have permission to do that again. It's not like I'm handing it back and saying, hey, go ahead, do it again. But it's also the acknowledgement of, I am valuable enough and I am worthy of love enough to be able to say, yes, that was disappointing for me, but it is not a reflection of my inadequacy. If you could be doing something that was so hurtful and so insensitive or so selfish or so thoughtless or whatever it was, that's a reflection of you being hurtful or selfish or thoughtless. It's not a reflection of me lacking as a human being. I was just at the other end of that unmet need. That was disappointing for me, but I need to breathe again. So it's the beginning of it is understanding what it's not. It is not handing over power. It is regaining your own power and taking back your own sense of being, because people who live with unforgiveness are weaker. They have to be on guard all the time. They have to be bitter. They have to be judgmental. They have to keep people at arm's length. That is a lot of work. You can't live consciously in the world and be so heightened all the time. And a lot of people will, in assessment, come up with the same symptoms that soldiers do after a war, when they have been, boom, so heightened the whole time and everything is aware and they're watching and they're trying to protect themselves and they can't get close to anything, they can't be vulnerable, and you burn up your resources. And we have people suffering from post-traumatic stress, which is a complete emotional, spiritual, physical exhaustion of having used up too much in a constant state of stress for too long. And people who live with unforgiveness have very similar, but much less often, symptoms. They also suffer from depression. They also get ill a lot. They also get headaches. They also freak out. They're also hypervigilant, and sounds and noises and lots of people make them uncomfortable. They're also heightened. They're also aware. They're always looking for something that's a threat. Whereas that's not really what living consciously is about. Living consciously says, I may be hurt in the world. I may be disappointed. I will survive it, because my internal resource of knowing who I am and what I'm worth is intact.
Lovely. Thanks, Bev. Join us for Chapter 8 up next.